Hello everyone, Professor Kurzluck here. So I wanted to make a video talking about answering the question of what is comparative politics. So we can ask the question, what exactly is comparative politics within the field of political science? So if you're brand new to political science, you might not know that political science is really divided into a series of subfields. There's American politics, which, as the name implies, looks specifically at the United States. There's international relations, which looks at how countries interact with one another. There's political theory, which deals with philosophical ideas about justice, freedom, and the best forms of governments. Comparative politics is the fourth major branch, and it's about looking at the politics of countries across the world and then comparing them. So, at its heart, comparative politics is the study of domestic politics in different states. Instead of focusing on relations between countries, it asks questions about how governments within countries operate, how people organize politically, and why different systems produce such different results. This can be in democratic principles, this can be in economic output. So, scholars in this field within comparative politics want to know why some countries become democracies while others remain authoritarian, why some economies grow rapidly while others remain stagnant, and why certain societies experience peace while others face constant conflict. So think of it this way. If international relations is about countries talking to each other, comparative politics is about what's happening inside the countries themselves. Now, of course, there's oftentimes overlap. Scholars of comparative politics also at times bring in stuff from American politics and theory and IR. But the field of political science is broken into these four main components. Sometimes methods, so like qualitative versus quantitative, is a fifth, but many political science departments, political science degrees are broken up into these four schools. So within comparative politics, the real goal is to identify patterns, identify causes. What causes economic growth? What causes democratic breakthroughs? Why does one type of electoral system lead to a two-party system, while others create multi-party coalitions? Again, why does democracy flourish in one region, one country, but fail in another? These kinds of questions are central to the field of comparative politics. One of the best ways to understand comparative politics is to place it alongside the other subfields of political science. American politics zooms in on institutions and behavior within the United States. Political theory debates normative ideas, like what justice is, or how society ought to be organized, how it should be organized. Again, international relations studies war, peace, diplomacy, and international organizations. Comparative politics, by contrast, studies the variety of political systems in the world and asks how and why they are similar, how and why they are different. The key is often comparison. Sometimes you study one country. If you do area studies within comparative, maybe you focus on one country. Other comparative politics focuses not just on one country in isolation, but putting multiple cases side by side to find patterns. So oftentimes in comparative, it'll look at multiple countries, but some scholars just focus mainly on one country, want to build a broader and greater understanding of that one country that then helps build our knowledge that other scholars might build into their studies that look at more than one country. So we can think about what are some of the other questions that comparativists ask. A lot of them revolve around regime type, meaning whether a country is democratic or authoritarian or somewhere in between. Maybe why do some countries democratize while others experience authoritarian rule and maintain authoritarian rule, and maybe how some authoritarian states utilize tactics to remain non-democratic. So then what allows dictatorships to maintain power and what causes them to collapse? Scholars also look closely at institutions, maybe looking at constitutions, electoral systems, and legislatures. They study how those institutions shape political outcomes, like whether a parliament tends to encourage coalition governments or whether a presidential system creates deadlock. Maybe something we hear a lot about in American political politics as well. Again, there's a lot of overlap at times. Comparative politics is also deeply connected to political economy. Scholars ask how politics shapes economics and how economics shapes politics. Why are some countries rich while others are poor? Why do some governments adopt free market reform while others rely on state control of the economy? And what explains persistent inequality in a country? These questions link directly to issues that matter for everyday lives, like jobs, wages, and social mobility. Another important focus in comparative politics is on conflict and violence. Why do civil wars break out in some countries, but not in others? What sparks revolutions and coups? Why do some diverse societies manage peaceful coexistence, while others descend into ethnic or religious conflict? Comparative politics gives us tools to make sense of these troubling but critical issues for understanding the world. Scholars of comparative politics also explore the role of identity in politics. They study how ethnicity, religion, class, and gender influence political participation, and why some groups achieve political representation while others are excluded. Identity politics is a major theme in today's world. We hear about it all the time. And comparative politics helps us analyze both the promises and the perils of mobilizing around identity. So, how do comparativists actually study all of this? There are a few different approaches. Sometimes they use case studies where they dive deeply into one country or one event to learn and explain in detail what really happened. For example, someone might study the Iranian Revolution of 1979 as a way of understanding how authoritarian regimes collapse. Another approach is the comparative method, where scholars look at a small number of cases, maybe 2 or 3 countries, and directly compare them. For instance, they may ask why Eastern Europe experienced rapid democratization in the 1990s while parts of the Middle East remained authoritarian. A third approach is large-scale quantitative analysis, where researchers use statistical methods to examine patterns across dozens or even hundreds of countries. They might test whether high income levels make democracy more likely, or whether inequality makes protests more frequent. Often, scholars combine these methods. A case study might generate a hypothesis, and then a large-scale data analysis might test whether that hypothesis holds up across the globe. This mix of approaches makes the field dynamic and constantly evolving. Now, why should we care about comparative politics? First, it helps us understand our own politics. If you're an Americanist, if your focus is on America, by comparing the United States to other democracies, we see how clearly what is unique and what is common. For instance, the American presidential system looks very different once you set it alongside a parliamentary democracy like those in Britain or Canada. Second, comparative politics has real policy relevance. Policymakers rely on its insights to design foreign aid programs, to promote democracy abroad, and to anticipate instability around the globe. Understanding why governments succeed or fail can help shape international strategies and prevent crises. Third, it's about global citizenship. In a world where challenges like migration and economic inequality cross borders, understanding how governments work and why they sometimes collapse is critical to being an informed global citizen. The field also has its share of big debates. Modernization theory once suggested that economic development naturally leads to democracy. Critics, especially from the dependency theory tradition, argued that global inequality keeps some countries trapped in authoritarianism. Scholars also debate whether political outcomes are shaped more by culture, the values and beliefs of society, or by institutions like constitutions and electoral systems. And then there's the debate over structure versus agency. Are outcomes determined by large historical and economic forces or by the decisions of individual leaders? Comparative politics gives us the framework to engage with these questions and apply them to the world we live in. Think about democratic backsliding in a place around the world, or a protest movement, or the rapid economic growth. Understanding those events in one country or two countries or three countries helps us make sense of the world around us and what we might see in the future. So if we want to bring this all together, comparative politics is the study of domestic politics around the globe. It explains why systems differ, why some succeed while others fail, and what lessons we can learn from comparing across case studies. It covers democracy and authoritarianism, institutions, identity, conflict, political economy, and it uses a range of methods to answer these questions. So if you have the opportunity to take a comparative politics course, you'll be exposed to all of these ideas in different case studies from different countries around the world. You'll understand about how democracy looks different in one place than another, and how authoritarianism, something we hear about in the news, looks different in one place as opposed to another. So if you have the opportunity to take a comparative politics course, I think you would find it quite interesting. Thank you.